Labor Talks was John DeRozier, recorded at Chippewa Valley Community Television in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Welcome to Labor Talks. Today's special guest is Eric Larsen, who is serving on the Eau Claire City Council. Eric is also a former Eau Claire City policeman. Eric, welcome to Labor Talks. Great to have you here, friend.
Thanks, it's my pleasure.
Okay. Now, our first question is, how long have you been on the City Council?
I was first elected to council in April of 2013, so a little over 2 years.
And why did you decide to run for the City Council?
Well, when I retired from the police department, I started thinking about what I want to do with all my spare time. And so one of the things I decided was to get involved in my political party, which at that time, I have to tell you, was the Republican Party.
Okay.
So I started going to party meetings, and someone asked me if I had considered running for anything. I said, well, maybe the City Council, because I've served the city for so many years, and I'm very proud of our city and would be happy to serve in that way. So I decided to run.
And you got elected.
That's right, to an at-large seat.
And what do you appreciate most about being on the City Council?
I'm really excited about the future for the city of Eau Claire. I think we finally sort of pulled ourselves out of a 50s and 60s mentality where people longed for the days when downtown was more of a shopping district, and it's just not so much shopping anymore. You don't go down there to get things that you can get at the mall usually. But so we're kind of in a renaissance period right now where not only are we revitalizing our downtown, but we're kind of changing the identity of Eau Claire, and I'm excited about it because we're starting to develop things like the trails and the park downtown and the social events that occur downtown to where we're going to be more attractive, I think, to young professionals who are going to be the future of the city. So I'm really excited to be a part of that.
And of course, my next question is a very natural one. What do you appreciate least about being on the City Council? Besides everything.
No, I'm really enjoying my time there. It takes more time than I thought it would, but it's enjoyable work, so I enjoy it very much. Sometimes when you get into the middle of political discussions over what direction to take and so on, I get a little frustrated when information comes out that turns the facts around on their head, and then you have a responsibility to the public, I think, to set the record straight on things. And so that's happened a lot over the Confluence Project and some other things that are going on downtown. And so I try to, I have a Facebook page, I try to set the record straight when I can.
And let's see, you mentioned the Confluence Project, and there was some false information coming out about that. Mm-hmm. Could you give us a couple of examples and then how it was corrected?
One thing is as laws as they relate to tax increment financing districts. Mm-hmm. The perception that's been put out there is that somehow tax increment financing takes some money away from the school district or from the technical college or the county or taxpayers, and that's just not true. What it is you're investing money that you would not otherwise have available to you if it were not for the TIF district.
Absolutely.
And then the return on that investment is, well, in the example of the Confluence Project, a mixed-use building that'll have a tax increment of about $21 million. So that, or a taxable increment of $21 million, that money would not be available if it were not for the TIF district. So, yeah, we bond to pay for part of the infrastructure and developer incentives and part of the Performing Arts Center. But when that bond is paid off, then the taxpayers realize the return on that. And the money that's used to pay it off is money that we would not have if it were not for the building of those facilities.
So if I understood you right, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and it won't be the first time, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for something like the Confluence Project, this is just a good example,
Mm-hmm.
there would be no additional tax money, TIF, okay?
Right.
Which is used to support the actual project.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes. If I can clarify, maybe this will help. The buildings that were torn down and are being replaced by the mixed-use building generated had a taxable value of about 1.5 or $2 million. The building that's replacing them will have a taxable value of $21.5 million. That's quite an increase. Now, of course, we have to pay the loans back. But once those loans are paid back, then all of that money is increased tax revenue for all of the taxing entities in this area. It's City of Eau Claire, County of Eau Claire, School District, and CVTC.
So in the long run, I'm going to take a chance here, folks, and try to be correct 2 times in a row, okay? In the long run, what this means is that you're going from 1.5 million to 20 million for the taxpayers in the
Correct.
long run. Did I get that right?
Taxable, right.
Thank you very much. Now that you are on the city council,
Yes, sir.
okay, do you have a different look or output or approach at the budget than when you were in law enforcement?
I don't think so, really, because I've lived in the city limits my whole career as a police officer. And so I pay taxes to the city just like every other person whose taxes paid my wages.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I can speak for all of the police officers on the police department when I say that we're very careful about how that money is spent. Let me give you an example. The City of Eau Claire has the fewest, or one of the fewest, number of police officers per capita in the state of Wisconsin. And yet we can be pretty proud about the fact that the City of Eau Claire is consistently measured as one of the safest cities to live in the country. That's because the people who work for us know their job, they do it well, and they're very careful about how that money is spent.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at it the same pretty much on the City Council, is that our goal is to provide the best services possible at the lowest cost possible. And so it's sort of the same outlook toward our budget.
Now, I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit because this is not one of the questions I have on my list.
Okay.
But wouldn't you be just a tad frustrated by learning that you need additional policemen, but they're not in the budget? Wouldn't that be that would bother me quite a bit?
Yeah, well, you certainly we need more police officers, but I think as a police officer and certainly as a city council representative, we understand that dollars are limited, and you have to be creative with how you increase your tax revenues. Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons why I'm so supportive of the Confluence Project. We do need more police officers. We need more street workers. We need more a broader availability of transit in the city of Eau Claire. And so we have to build our tax revenue. Because of limits that have been placed on our ability to raise property taxes, the most effective way to do that now is to encourage development. And so I think the Confluence project and future projects like that will help us in that regard.
Well, I honestly believe you need additional policemen because, folks, he hasn't seen me drive, and we'll just let it go at that. Okay?
Probably a good thing then. I haven't seen you drive.
Now we're going to take a slight detour from local issues, and we're going to take a look at what happened down in Madison regarding the open records law. Now, just a brief introduction. 12 Republicans on the Joint Finance Committee decided to gut the open records law, which means that laws created by state lawmakers, their aides, this would affect also local government. The public would not be able to review these actions or laws taken by the state or local governments. Fortunately, we had a aroused public, and they let our lawmakers know in Madison exactly what they thought. Again, this was a proposal by 12 Republican lawmakers. Eric is a Republican. I need to point that out right now. And I'm not.
No, I need to correct you on that, John. I was a Republican. I'm not a Republican anymore.
One of the few times I enjoy being wrong. But that's where
I don't have a party right now.
Okay. But do you support or oppose the attempt to gut the open records law? And if I left anything out, please.
Yeah.
Just educate me.
I oppose that very much. I think it's one of the stupidest things I've seen come out of Madison in a long time. And that's saying a lot over the last 5 years. In the local level, we take pride in doing things and making decisions in the daylight, where people see how the deliberations go and have an availability to come and speak to the council and put input into the decision making. And so, had that stayed in, I think you would have seen some movement or some action by the local city council, not only to voice our opposition to it, but to do whatever we can to make sure that our deliberations at the local level are done in the daylight. And I certainly, if someone asked for information that's subject to open records law under the current law, I would supply it regardless of what the state law said. So I can't say any stronger than that how much I oppose that idea.
Had this become law, had this remained in the budget, how would that have affected local government, specifically Eau Claire? Now, you just touched on it a bit, but...
I haven't read the proposal. I saw an article in the newspaper that indicated that this proposal would have extended to local governments as well.
Yes.
And what I can say is that whatever we at the local level would have been able to do, and I don't know exactly what that is because as I said, I haven't seen what the law was proposed to be. But we would do our level best, and I certainly would make any records that somebody wants to see available.
Now, I understand everything you said so far,
Mm-hmm.
and you haven't seen the full provision.
Correct.
Do you think that had this passed, had this stayed in the state budget, and by the way, I'd like to point this out, the people who supported gutting the open records law snuck this into the state budget in the wee hours of the morning. So much for transparency, so much for open, honest government. What they did was they acted like thieves in the night. That's just my humble opinion. But supposing it had stayed there, would you have felt obligated, or would anybody on the city council have felt obligated? Would they have been forced to say we can't release this information if somebody asked?
Well, I don't think so. I don't think so because Well, as I said, I didn't see the law, but whatever we could do to make our records available to the public, we would do. And so that's the best way I can answer it.
Not too shabby, not too shabby
Thank
at
you.
all. Now, obviously, Governor Walker, along with Assembly Speaker Robin Voss and the Senate Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald, they got an awful lot of feedback on this.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden they decided this was not a good idea.
Right.
Do you believe, and if I come across as being naive, good. Because do you believe that the reason this provision was pulled out was because the public was just, shall we say, a tad upset?
Absolutely, I believe that. And I think it's an example of why it's so important for us to keep up with what's going on in Madison and make sure that our access to government, our belief in open government is maintained.
And I just learned from His Majesty Dick Purvis that we have 15 minutes left. Thank you, Dick. Yeah, I was amazed at the public reaction. I really was, because you think that most people don't pay attention. But this time, holy mackerel, they really got off their
Right.
behinds and let Madison know about it.
And it was a broad-based reaction.
Yep.
It was reaction from organizations on the left and on the right, and in the media, of course, and then individuals. It was. I'm kind of proud of the way Wisconsin stood up to that idea.
You're not the only one, fella. You're not the only one. Now, is there anything more you'd like to add to this attempt to gut the open records law? Anything else you want to add? Anything I missed?
I don't think so. I'm glad it's over.
So are a lot of people. Well, let's go back to local government. Let's see. Has Act 10 affected our city employees at all?
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
And I'm glad you came to that because it gives me a chance to explain my background a little bit. Because I want to preface this answer with the understanding that I have to confess to you, I voted for Scott Walker twice. Once when he was first elected and once during the recall election. When I got on city council and really understood what Act 10 was about, that was the first time when I really understood that I could no longer support Scott Walker or the Republican Party. And there's been other things that the Wisconsin Republicans have been involved in that I do not want my name associated with. But that's for another time. With regard to Act 10, what it did to our employees was divide them into 4 categories of employees. One category is the non-union employees, which we've always had some. And then the protective services, transit, and the 4th category is the one that I'm most concerned about at this point. This is the category of employees who choose to remain associated with, general employees who choose to remain associated with a union. Those employees are actually punished for their decision. In other words, when we, because of the way that we are forced to calculate wages for those employees, nobody else but those employees who are general employees that remain in a union, it gets very complicated, but when they choose to do that, wage increases are reduced for them. In other words, we can give everyone across the board a 2% raise, but that category only gets 1.67, I believe, raise. And it's not because what I heard sometimes during the discussion of that contract was that, well, you know, they choose to be in the union, so It's their choice. No, it's not. The reason that they're being punished is because the law that was passed, proposed by Scott Walker and passed by the Wisconsin Republicans, that punishes them for making that decision. That is not a Republican idea. It's certainly not a Democratic idea, and it's not good labor practice. And I can't voice my opposition to Act 10 enough because of that provision. When I was running for city council, my answer to questions about Act 10 was, there are things in Act 10 that I disagree with, but I said, I don't think there's anything in Act 10 that prevents us from treating our employees fairly. I was completely wrong. Act 10 is designed to treat a certain group of people unfairly, and it's because of the Republicans' opposition to the union membership. Now, I have never been opposed to union membership. Unions provide a service both for the employees and for the employer. It provides an opportunity for them to sit down at a table and negotiate conditions of work and wages and benefits and so on, so that everyone feels like they've got a seat at the table. That's a very important work environment thing to happen. Could we have revisited some of the laws that pertain to unions? Perhaps. But the value of unions should be held in high esteem, in my opinion.
Thank you. So it's safe to say that just as the argument was made that some city employees did not have to remain in the union, there were those lawmakers who did not have to support Act 10 just to get at the unions.
Correct.
That's about the size of it, isn't it?
It is. And one thing I would add is that one of the arguments that was made in support of Act 10 was that unions had become too involved in the political process and had too much political power. I think Act 10 actually made things potentially worse in that regard. Before Act 10, unions would sit down with the employer and negotiate terms of a contract. And each side was required to negotiate in good faith to come up with an agreeable solution to workplace issues. Now, the employees aren't governed by the union contract. They're governed by an employee handbook, which is passed by City Council. So what that means is if local employees have the right people on their City Council, they don't have to negotiate anymore. All they have to do is get a vote in their favor on the City Council. That gives them actually more political power than having to sit down and negotiate a contract. Am I right?
You're right. You're right. So it's sort of like Walker and Company just to kind of bit their own hands.
That's right.
So to speak. They just tend to.
And it hasn't happened yet. I have faith in our employees that they're fair in the way that their requests by and large are reasonable.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, as long as they have 6 votes on City Council, they can have whatever they want.
You got that, folks? Okay. Now, can we move on, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And please don't call me sir. My name is John. Have the various city departments seen a decrease in revenues?
Well, I don't have the knowledge to break it down by department, but I can tell you this, that shared revenues have been on the decline in Wisconsin by quite a bit. In 1990, 53.6% of the city budget came from state shared revenue.
Mm-hmm.
In 2014, that's fallen to 9.4%. That means that whereas 47% or 46% of the budget formerly came from property taxes, now 91% comes from property taxes. So it's another point where the state has bit off its nose to spite its face, you might say.
Okay.
Because the pressure is to keep property taxes down, and we set levy limits and so on to do that. But then they're taking away the money that was intended since 1911 to offset the need for property taxes. So I think they're, again, doing things that defeat their own argument.
I agree. Now, my next question would be, has the Eau Claire City Council overall seen a reduction in state revenues? You've already answered it. So
Yes.
let's move right along to one of the most important questions we have in this program. And I think you folks already know what the answer is, because all you have to do is look at this tie. But are you now, or have you ever been, a Chicago Bears fan?
I have not. I have never been a Chicago Bears fan.
And would you care to explain why?
Well, I've always been a Packer fan. That's it. But I will tell you this. I used to like the old Minnesota Vikings under Bud Grant. I thought they had a great team. I was a Packer fan, but I enjoyed watching them play in the Super Bowl and so on. And another reason is because my grandfather used to shoot pool with Bud Grant up in Superior.
Yeah.
So
My hometown is Superior. Bud Grant was born and raised in Superior.
Yep.
And Eric is right. And Bud Grant was a very good coach. Unfortunately, he was with the wrong team.
that's right. That's right.
Okay. Now, is there anything that we haven't covered in our discussion here? Anything you'd like to add, or?
Well, we've covered a lot. I enjoy my time on City Council. I look forward to running for my seat again in the spring.
Okay.
And
Good.
I hope there will be enough support for me to continue. But I always said to myself, I don't make my decision based on trying to win another election. I really try to look at the facts surrounding a question and make the best decision I can.
In other words, what's best for the city of Eau Claire and the people here.
Correct.
That pretty much sums it up, doesn't it?
That's right.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cbctv.org.